boxes.
Do I stay here and help forge a future for my grandchildren, or do I just go home and say, let somebody else deal with this problem?
It's a question many elected officials have had to answer when it comes to whether the job is worth it. But this session, that balance became more public and more punitive for one Eastern Idaho legislator. So lawmakers made a law that leaves your city open to a lawsuit. So how are they going to pay for that? Well, maybe cities can dip into that legal defense fund that has seen so many withdrawals lately.
Thank you for the Empowering Parent Grant. I will play a short song for you to show you what the grant has helped me do.
Several who have benefited from the Empowering Parents program brought what they've learned to try to convince lawmakers to keep it going. But has the program run out its string?
And I think a lot of it has to do with I've been one of the few that have stood up to the far right extremism.
And because of that, Republican Representative Stephanie Mickelson believes she's had a pretty big target on her back the last several years. We've talked about this before, when Representative Mickelson was censured and then told she could no longer run as a Republican by her local legislative GOP committee. That leadership has since been replaced. But last week, we learned how big that target actually is. Daniel Walters of Investigate West dropped a story of how far-right Republican activists have tried to weaponize a federal agency against those who don't agree with the new administration's approach to immigration enforcement. Specifically, how a ranking member of the Ada County Republican Central Committee targeted Representative Mickelson with threats of raids by ICE. Well, that raid happened back in January. Mickelson, who owns several food production and seed potato companies in southeastern Idaho, says immigration enforcement isn't really her biggest concern about this. It's more about the culture of politics these days and how intimidation tactics like this could impact anyone's effect as a legislator.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me.
For many people,
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
The second inauguration of Donald Trump
Solemnly swear
That I will faithfully execute.
was a turning point.
faithfully execute.
For Idaho Representative Stephanie Mickelson,
They showed up at our business, days later.
that point came later that week.
He started targeting me on Tuesday, and they were there by Friday.
Representative Mickelson is referring to a January 21st social media post by Ada County GOP Vice Chairman Ryan Spoon, in which he asked the Deputy Director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement if he could please send some illegal immigration raids to the businesses owned by Idaho State Representative Stephanie Mickelson. She's been bragging about how many illegals her businesses employ. Representative Mickelson says,
So I was actually home that Friday.
it was an off day during the early legislative session when ICE showed up at one of her eastern Idaho farms.
And then when they couldn't get a hold of me, then they start texting 911, Mom, which means I have to call.
Not coincidence?
I don't think it was coincidence, but, could have been, but I doubt it.
Yeah. They keep pointing to something you said during last session, though.
So what it was is we were having a discussion, and it was a Texas force style bill, which was already tied up in the courts.
This right here is another key component to us protecting and defending the people of Idaho, and that is protecting the very borders of our state.
So on this particular case, and I feel like this has been happening a lot lately, is we target a certain ethnicity or a certain group, and we want to demonize them.
For debate on motion, Labor 32.
It was during the House debate on last session's immigration enforcement bill.
I think you need to remember that every food processor, probably in the state, from the large food processors to the small ones.
But I stood up and I said, I think we need to be really thoughtful before we're passing some of these bills, because I think they have unintended consequences.
So if you guys think that you haven't been touched by an illegal immigrant's hands in some way, through either your traveling or your food, you're kidding yourselves.
So because of that, then they claimed that I had admitted to something which I had never admitted to.
Which is likely what Spoon referenced on January 23rd of this year, calling Mickelson a, quote, plantation mistress, and said, we're going to take your farm slaves away. However, Spoon told Investigate West, quote, her own testimony drew attention to herself.
And the fallacy in all this, every employer out there has to follow the law. But the law is very narrow as far as what we can get, what we can ask, and what we can do. If we don't follow those laws, and if we were knowingly hiring undocumented workers or illegals, you can get a fine of up to $27,000 per employee.
For Representative Mickelson, her biggest worry isn't necessarily her family business,
Double check.
but the chilling effect this had on her ability to do her other job, like when a similar immigration bill came back this session. When this came around for you to stand up and speak your mind on a topic like this, did that change?
This year, I didn't stand up and talk about it.
Why not?
I felt like that I didn't need to make myself and my family and our businesses a bigger target than it needed to be. And so I simply stayed quiet on the issue.
So you've had to change the way you do things?
I did have to change the way I did things, and I had a lot of sleepless nights where I said to myself, if I can't be effective anymore, then maybe it is time, then maybe I need to not be here. I need to do something differently. Or my choice was, I'm going to have to stand up and find my voice again. And so I finally decided that I'm going to do the best I can do while I'm here. I represent my community, I represent my constituents, I represent the people of Idaho. And if we lose good statesmen in this body, then where will we be?
Is this a bigger problem in this building or in this realm of politics where people feel like they can't say something because they'll get a target on their backs?
I think you're seeing more and more of that, especially in the last couple of years with the rise of social media and confrontational politics. You see this situation where people really think about whether or not they're ever going to make a public statement. Part of the problem with these extremist groups is they've come in, a lot of them have come in from another state, and we welcome out-of-staters to come in and move into Idaho, but to come in and then tell us that they know the Idaho way. The Idaho way is when we have a problem, we roll up our sleeves and we work together and we help our neighbors, or we have differences, but we sit at the table and hammer through what's the best solution for Idaho. But I think until some of us start standing up and saying this is enough, if you want to have a conversation, that's great. Let's not be an anarchist or an arsonist. Let's be an architect. Let's find a good future for Idaho.
Well, according to Investigate West's story, after that January raid of Mickelson Farms, one employee was arrested by ICE and sent to a detention center in Las Vegas. Both she and her family say they would never knowingly employ an undocumented worker, and they follow all federal and state laws to be in compliance. By the way, Mickelson did vote in favor of that immigration bill last session, despite her debate. And this ICE episode hasn't stopped her from speaking out last month against a bill requiring all employers in Idaho to use E-Verify, a federal program to prove workers are authorized to work here, mostly over the cost of enforcing it. That's why she wanted to see it not go anywhere. Well, she told us instead of getting tied up in all this national stuff colleagues seem to be using for campaign purposes lately, she'd rather focus on issues that matter to Idahoans. Less headline stuff like lower utility bills and water rights for future generations. As for Ryan Spoon, the vice chair of the Ada County GOP, who's made no secret of wanting to make Idaho unbearable for anyone who doesn't align with his politics, even though he only moved here 6 years ago. He refused to speak with us about this story. Actually, let me read for you what he did say. He said, the details of this story have already been reported by several reputable news or sources. You're welcome to republish that information from those stories in the hopes of someday becoming a reputable news outlet. Okay.
Senate State Affairs on this Monday morning. Hopefully the last time we'll be greeting you in this committee on a Monday morning. And there was a hint in there somewhere.
A not so subtle hint, by the way, that maybe lawmakers are ready to be done with this legislative session as they begin the 13th week of the 68th legislature. Never too late to bring up some new stuff, though. You know, the term local control bounces around the State House kind of like a pickleball. Makes a lot of noise, doesn't seem to go very far, though, because lately these lawmakers lean toward taking away some of that local control. Joe Paris, though, he joins us now with a new bill that seems to maybe make up for that a little bit, maybe offers some cover for some questionable laws.
Yeah, it's a thing that we've reported on several times here on the 208 over the years. Sometimes Idaho passes laws and very quickly legal groups file a lawsuit calling it unconstitutional. This happened just last week with the immigration law signed by Governor Little. When those cases end up in a courtroom, there is a special fund the state can use to pay for legal costs, including major payouts if a law is found unconstitutional. Millions of dollars have been spent over the past decade, at least $11 million, according to Senator James Ruckty, paid for by Idaho's Legal Defense Fund. But recent laws have made counties and cities liable in a lawsuit, and they don't have access to that money, creating a dilemma described by Shoshone County's prosecuting attorney.
We can stand our ground and defend the laws enacted by our legislators, or we can risk the financial threat to the cost and attorney's fees of the other side if we don't prevail in defending the constitutionality of those laws.
And so for a large entity with lots of money to come in and pick on a small city or a small county because they have a smaller budget, I think is particularly wrong.
So that Constitutional Defense Fund, the center of Senate Bill 1125, it passed the Senate State Affairs Committee, but Senator James Ruckty made the point that maybe Idaho could just avoid all these legal fees if lawmakers were more thoughtful about what they pass. Who might be opposed to this bill? Well, organizations whose entire existence is built on filing lawsuits. This would possibly remove the option of settling a lawsuit. So we'll see where this goes. Also in state affairs that same morning, this morning, House Bill 398, which would increase transparency for lobbyists, it cleared the vote in committee, leaving one more hurdle before it could get to the governor's desk. Secretary of State McGrain appeared in committee to give context as to why.
We're seeing considerably more spending this session than we have typically seen. Of the top 10 spenders, 6 of those top 10 spenders are groups based outside of Idaho. Mailers, the Facebook ads, the other things. And we have 3 groups just in those first 2 months that are well over $100,000 each.
Full Idaho Senate, we'll get to this soon. Brian, as we approach the month of April, that begins tomorrow. No sign of slowing down, full steam ahead.
And they keep introducing bills even this afternoon.
Yeah, new RSs were printed this afternoon, including one that would allow, I think, ivermectin to be sold over the counter.
Over the counter. I think you get those at veterinary supply stores now?
DMB, yeah.
Yeah, all right, thanks, Joe. Well, now that Idaho has a tax credit available to pay for school and school supplies, lawmakers are looking to get rid of some of that redundancy. For years, the Empowering Parents program has allowed Idaho families to apply for grants to help with educational expenses. Stuff like internet access, maybe a laptop, even some tutoring. And it's been a pretty popular program. This year alone, nearly 30,000 students have been or were enrolled in the program. But now there is a bit of a push to kill the Empowering Parents program, right, Aspen?
Yeah, it comes down to lawmakers feeling like the program did what it's supposed to do, and now we no longer need it. The program originally created in 2020 by the name Strong Families, Strong Students. It was funded with federal pandemic relief dollars, helping parents with expenses associated with virtual learning while schools were closing due to the pandemic. Then in 2022, lawmakers converted the program into the Empowering Parents program, a $30 million ongoing program that used state funds. Senator Camille Blaylock, the bill's sponsor for this repeal, says now is the right time to bring the program to an end.
Here's the reality. The emergency that justified this program is over. Schools are open, students are settled, and our educational operations are back to normal. This program was meant to be a temporary solution to a temporary problem. And the problem is over. And if we don't take action now, this program risks becoming a permanent entitlement.
Now today, all of those who came to testify on the bill were Idahoans in the arts community. Families who have students who play instruments or take dance lessons. Those parents have concerns if this is appealed, they won't get access to certain opportunities important to their children.
We all know that school districts have to make budget cuts, and usually the first thing to go is extracurriculars like music and arts. So moving forward, families are going to be even more reliant on this grant in order to give their children a level playing field.
Senator Blaylock did remind the committee everyone who was part of the Empowering Parents program will be able to apply for those House Bill 93 tax credits. That measure has passed the Idaho legislature and has been signed by the governor. The Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit provides for a tax credit of up to $5,000 for eligible education expenses, including private school tuition. So by ending this program, Brian, which this would go in effect June 30th, it would allow for some maybe available funds to be used in the general fund of $30 million.
Okay, but when you apply for this Empowering Parents program, don't you get approved for like 3 years?
Yeah.
How does that play out?
Yeah, you're told once the money gets to your account, you have 3 years to use it.
Okay.
That wouldn't be the case if this passes. That would come to an end. Parents would have to use that before June 30th, which really goes against what they were told.
And then they'd have to reapply to the parental tax credit in order to get applied there. They start with the lower income, so they may be kind of...
Yep, there's no guarantee.
No guarantees. All right. Thank you very much, Aspen. He's been involved with Idaho politics since the mid-1980s, but now he says he's facing the challenge of his lifetime. Former Governor Dirk Kempthorne has been diagnosed with colon cancer. Kempthorne, who began his political career as the mayor of Boise in 1985, says he will begin chemotherapy immediately. Kempthorne served 2 terms as Boise mayor, then went on to become a U.S. senator, then Idaho's 30th governor in 1999. Before the end of his second term, though, President George W. Bush picked Kempthorne to lead the Department of the Interior, which he did until January of 2009. Since then, Kempthorne's continued his public service as an advocate for the Idaho Veterans Cemetery, the chair of the Commissioning Committee Advisory Board for the USS Idaho, and as the chair of the Peregrine Fund. His greatest joy, though, being the grandfather of 7. Pop Dirk, they call him. In a statement released today by his family, Kempthorne said in part, quote, "Throughout my life, I have tackled many challenges head on. I will do the same with this, which may be the challenge of my lifetime. I hope that sharing this message will help others." With colorectal cancer being the second leading cause of cancer-related deaths in the U.S., Kempthorne says he wants to use this diagnosis to urge everyone over the age of 45 to get tested. It is a highly preventable and treatable disease when detected early. We got several updates on stories we brought you, including a $400,000 settlement in Caldwell and continued construction at Interfaith Sanctuary. Abby Davis has all that in today's 411.
Jury selection is underway in the first Arizona case against Lori Vallow Daybell. Remember, back in 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison in Idaho after a jury convicted her of murdering 2 of her children and her husband's late wife. Then she was sent to Arizona in 2024, where she faces 2 charges of conspiracy. The first conspiracy trial is centered around her former husband, Charles Vallow, who was shot and killed in 2019 by Lori's brother, Alex Cox. Alex was never charged and died later that year of natural causes. Police think Alex conspired with Lori to kill Charles. Lori is representing herself for this trial. The city of Caldwell's insurance provider, Idaho County's risk management program, confirmed this morning it paid $400,000 to settle a lawsuit earlier this month. The city's former human resources director, Shelley Boggy, filed the lawsuit in February, claiming she wasn't reappointed after investigating sexual harassment and workplace complaints against the Caldwell Police Chief Rex Ingram last year. The city said earlier it did not want to settle and will continue to dispute allegations. Crews are back at work at the new Interfaith Sanctuary in Boise after they were instructed to stop about 10 days ago. In January, the Idaho Supreme Court found the Boise City Council improperly approved the project for the new location on State Street. According to the shelter's executive director, Interfaith submitted modified construction plans, which were recently approved by the city.
If I thought it had anything to do that would stop Alex from leaving, I would not have allowed this bill to come up on the floor.
Today, the House said bon voyage to the current director of Idaho Health and Welfare, Alex Adams, before he jets off to our nation's capital. President Donald Trump nominated Adams to serve as the Assistant Secretary for the Administration of Children and Families at the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. This is the 3rd Idahoan Trump's appointed to his administration. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Davis.
And that is what so many of you saw and heard around midday when those storms rolled through with a cold front. It was dramatic. March definitely roaring out like a lion. Things have quieted down a little bit, but you can see we're still pretty active out there. And now that we've had some sunshine breaking through, we're seeing another batch of thunderstorms firing up. We had one just cross I-84, portions of Canyon County, just north of Boise, a thunder and lightning right outside of Homedale in the last hour or so as well. So we're not out of the woods as far as storm activity goes, so won't be as widespread as what we saw midday with that front. Look at this view out in Payette County looking off towards the east. This is I-84 and Highway 95. You can see those dramatic storms. You can see the downbursts of rain coming out of the base of those clouds. So again, active weather will continue through the evening, but it'll be really spotty, tough to pinpoint exactly where the storms might fire up. So I would just count on a couple of isolated showers and storms if you are headed out this evening. Temperatures will hover in the upper 40s until sunset, then we'll dip into the low 40s. The parent system, or the parent part of this system, I should say, is still off to the west. It'll start drifting to the south and east over the next 24 hours, and that will keep some showers and spot storms in the mix tomorrow and Wednesday. But for the most part, the Treasure Valley is looking much drier tomorrow than today. We'll see highs just in the low 50s tomorrow in Boise, and after that, things are on the up and up. A few stray showers may linger into Wednesday along with some breezy winds, but then we rebound nicely back into the 60s and even 70 degrees by early next week.
All right, a lot of you sending some messages today about Representative Stephanie Mickelson and what she's had to deal with when it comes to ICE raids and people calling for those kind of things. As a lifelong Idahoan, these politicians are pushing so many of us out of Idaho. Between the useless laws and the West Ada debacle, this is not the Idaho I know and love, says Samantha from Boise. Meanwhile, Enrique in Boise says, Ryan Spoon is from California, telling Idahoans to leave the state if they think differently than himself. The word delusional comes to mind. That's from Enrique in Boise. Ryan Spoon makes this Idaho native understand why the slogan, Idaho is great if you hate, is gaining traction with people looking to move here because, well, that's what they do, which is sad and not helpful. That's from John in Boise. The pirate politics happening here are indicative of our nation's leadership. It's trickle-down permission for a bad behavior. So sad, says Courtney in Ketchum. We teach our kids not to bully, which is kind of what this has been about. And the elephant in the room, Joe Ford says, why do we have to hire illegal immigrants just so we don't have to pay them much or give them any benefits to sustain our agricultural business? That's not how this works, Joe. I've talked to several farmers, dairy farmers, regular farmers. They can't get people to take these jobs for any amount of money. It's too hard. They don't want to do it. So this is kind of what it works. And they do pay benefits. They don't get them back, though. They pay taxes. You know, ivermectin is sold over the counter. Go to any feed store. Remember during the pandemic, we showed you those empty shelves? Yep.